Welcome to Enchanted Astrology Podcast with Ariel Smith, and thank you so much for being here today. In this episode, I want to talk about an upcoming transit that many of us are already beginning to feel on some level. It's stirring something up within us, and I just want to give it some language, some context, because this is likely to be a major theme over the next 14-year cycle. And that is Neptune moving into Aries, which will happen on January 26, 2026, which also happens to be my birthday. Now, we know Neptune as a planet associated with things like illusion, intuition, spirituality, but she is also a stabilizer. She is that coherent unity field, all things existing in a perfectly stable, coherent state. And we also associate her with that divine love. And she is a force that dissolves what blocks a sign's higher expression. And what often is blocking a sign's higher expression is a distortion, or in other words, an illusion. And she works to dissolve that, to end up with a more pure, high expression of that sign. Now we can look in our recent history and how she's moved through the past two signs and the experiences that have followed to get some context over how this tends to play out, what her goals are, what is a result. And way back in 1998, Neptune entered Aquarius, and she was there until 2011. And during that time, Neptune helped to dissolve barriers to connection, to equality, to our collective intelligence. And she removed illusions that kept people isolated or trapped in these rigid hierarchies. And Neptune doesn't work alone. I often look to Uranus for indication on where the disruptions are taking place, what is being dismantled or shaken up to open space for Neptune to stabilize these higher expressions of the sign. And as Neptune entered Aquarius, Uranus was also in Aquarius, shaking things up and disrupting outdated systems. And we saw things like the internet coming out during this time, absolutely innovating our means and ways of connecting with each other. We saw a destabilization of the hierarchy structure where these whistleblowers were coming out and really challenging our unquestionable faith in higher authorities and in these hierarchies altogether. And we saw the rise of this social networking, this peer-to-peer sharing, Wikipedia, new forms of community. And that is through Neptune stabilizing the vision of connection in Aquarius. And Uranus worked to ensure that those old barriers fell away so that this vision could actually take root. So then Neptune entered her current station in Pisces in 2011, and she's been focusing on themes of empathy, compassion, sensitivity. And during this time, as she entered Pisces, Uranus was in Aries, and he was bringing in this courage and this initiative that would allow people to act and really live and move these Piscean values forward. So Neptune in Pisces was dissolving the illusions that blocked our emotional awareness, our spiritual connection, things like rigid spiritual dogmas, all kinds of shame and stigma around us being vulnerable, our vulnerability, and emotional repression. And Uranus and Aries help to disrupt these old patterns of fear and inaction, suppression, giving people the ability to really act from a place of compassion. And we've seen lots of movements occur and speaking up and actions being taken to really enforce a much more compassionate, empathetic world. So we see this pattern where Neptune stabilizes a sign's higher expression and Uranus catalyzes what needs to change for that stabilization to be possible. So now, January 26th of next year, Neptune will move into Aries, the sign of, your sovereignty, your will, your own self-sourced initiative. And Neptune will be dissolving illusions that block you from acting from your own authority, helping us to step into more of a sovereign self-expression, a sovereign self. And as always, she will be working with Uranus to do this. And as she moves into Aries on January 26th, Uranus will still be retrograde in Taurus. And Uranus will station direct on February 3rd. And Uranus is disrupting these old security-based fears and structures. And here we are confronting our value systems, money, our assumptions around survival. What does it take to survive? Bodily limits, even. And the old value structure is not going to stabilize any further. It's not going to support this plan that Neptune has in Aries. And so Uranus in Taurus is really challenging our belief that security must come before we act, because we've built these systems that are so focused on mitigating any potential risk and trying to gain this complete safety and security before we take action from there. But what it's really doing is restricting our ability to act. So Neptune in Aries, she's moving into Aries and she's awakening our will and our inner authority. And Uranus in Taurus is helping to release what is putting the brake on that. So what is dissolving here is the belief that security must come first, and that you must be certain before you act, before you make a choice or make a move, and that you need to be granted permission first. Now we have Saturn entering Aries on February 14th, 2026, on Valentine's Day, which creates this interesting dynamic because there's almost a month where you really feel your inner authority and your will come online before you see any validation in the external world. And this is actually deeply in alignment with these Aries energies that we're moving through, where you don't wait for permission or approval before taking action. Those things follow after you act. And it feels like that energy here of you have to believe it before you can see it. So this will be a major theme as we move out of this Taurus comfort zone that we've been so used to being in, which is a place of safety, security, external validation. So Saturn comes in after the initiation to give structure and support to the action that has already begun. So in other words, first comes courage, then your will and initiative, and then the framework will come that allows it to thrive. And there can be this belief that somehow if people are acting from their own authority, their own sovereignty, there's going to be pure chaos and anarchy, and we're going to run amok. But Saturn coming into Aries here is actually very supportive of this not showing as a reckless expression. It feels incredibly self-disciplined and very sustainable. So one final piece that I want to discuss during this Neptune entering Aries, as she enters Aries on January 26th, she will be trining Black Moon Lilith in Sagittarius. And we know Black Moon Lilith to be that repressed, unintegrated truth, instinctual, sovereignty, basically a refusal to submit to authority, or a false authority, or an imposed authority. And in Sagittarius here, she's very focused on her own inner belief, her own self-sourced meaning, and her own moral independence. So this era of Neptune in Aries begins here with a powerful statement, and that is, I no longer believe the story that told me I shouldn't act. I don't believe that shame. Or even, I act because my authority originates within me. So Lilith is clearing these moral blocks so that Neptune's awakening of our will can stabilize very naturally without being stopped by fear or shame or blind obedience to outdated systems. So there is a big theme here that centers around truth does not require institutional permission. So when we look at our institutions, our bureaucracies, what is getting dissolved here is, having credentials be proof of your intelligence or your worth. Having a one-size-fits-all approach. Having one institution hold supreme authority. When we look at our educational system, we're already seeing the experimentation with these alpha schools where, rather than the traditional classroom model of having all the students learn the same information on the same schedule and advancing at the same time, whether you really truly got it or not, we're seeing these alpha schools which are tailoring the learning content to each student, and you get to move on when you master the content on your own time, in your own way, and it's a much more self-directed experience. And rather than our governance system being based on this belief that citizens are incapable of discernment, or compliance with our system equals safety, and that could shift more to decisions that are being made closer to the people actually affected, operating from a place of just high transparency and accountability. So Lilith's message here is, if you can't explain it truthfully, You do not get to enforce it. So Neptune is dissolving this authority that is rooted in, a hierarchy, in fear, in a uniform, and anything that's operating on this zero tolerance logic, which is often completely disconnected from the context. So there's a lot more room for situational judgment here. It's much more individualistic. It's not just hiding behind a stack of procedures. And in terms of our restrictive policies, these blanket rules and policies that are supporting those Taurian themes, those Taurus themes that are being evolved out of things like, preemptive risk, suppressing liability, enforcing, narratives, and policies that are just simply rooted in a complete distrust of human judgment or an absolute fear of disorder. And I could feel this shift to a higher expression here where we are operating on fewer rules and an emphasis on your personal responsibility, on natural consequences rather than prohibiting everybody. There is an emphasis that there are always going to be consequences to the frequency you choose to embody, you choose to experience. There are always going to be consequences to that, and that becomes very self-regulatory. So there are still boundaries, but I see Neptune dissolving all of those excess boundaries. So in its higher expression, Black Moon Lilith is working with Neptune in Aries here to dissolve the belief that institutions own the truth. So if you've been waiting for permission or external validation to act on something you know inside is right, these energies will help to awaken that Aries energy of I am my own source of validation. I am my own inner authority. So as we move into this new year and toward 2026, as Neptune prepares to change signs, I want to offer a sense of reassurance that this shift does not feel chaotic. It isn't something to fear. It feels very sovereign. It feels grounded and honestly very much right on time. And it's always good to remember these transitions are not something that's happening to us, they're happening for us. And they are always in service of our highest good. They're always gently guiding us back into deeper alignment with our own inner authority. And this is really a time to remember who you are as a multidimensional divine being that is capable of choice, discernment, and self-directed action. This is an exciting moment and year to feel more connected to yourself, more autonomous in your own life, your own experience, more trusting of your own inner guidance. So if you would like to explore Aries energy in a gentle and playful way as we prepare for this new chapter, I offer an Aries Yin Yoga class that is available on my website at enchantedistrology.ca. It's a beautiful way to feel into the higher expression of this energy and to consciously work with it through the body. So if you feel called, it is available there. Thank you so much for listening. I truly appreciate each and every one of you who takes the time out of your day to be here with me. I will be back next week.